It was a cloudy morning, like most May days in Huntsville this year. I sat on the porch of my small house on the edge of town, sipping a strong black coffee and watching the rain drumming methodically on the roof. The phone rang suddenly, a shrill trill that broke the silence, making me flinch. I glanced at the screen. Elliot. My son rarely called, usually only on holidays or when he needed something. I took a deep breath before answering. Martha Barnett, I said, as I'd become accustomed to during my 28 years on the force. Hi, Mom. Elliot's voice sounded strained. How are you? I'm okay. What's wrong? I never like to beat around the bush. There was a pause. I could hear his breathing and some fumbling in the background. Jennifer must have been nearby. Mom, you know Wesley is getting married at the end of the month. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, I saw the announcement in the paper. In fact, I found out about my grandson's engagement from a former coworker of mine, Frank, who happened to meet Elliot in town. I didn't hear about it from my own son. Look, I'm calling about it, Elliot said quickly, as if he wanted to end the conversation quickly. We talked it over with Jennifer and Amber's parents, and we decided it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding. I felt a cold wave roll through my body. Not that I'd expected an invitation, we'd barely spoken to each other for the past 15 years. But to hear it outright like that, we've decided, I repeated his words. Yes, it's a mutual decision. You see, Amber's family is very conservative, and with your background and, the whole thing. He hesitated. It's just easier if you don't come. The thing, it's always that case. Like my whole life was reduced to one damn day 15 years ago. Does Wesley know you're calling? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course he does. It's his decision too, Elliot answered too quickly, and I realized he was lying. 28 years on the force had taught me how to tell a lie by my voice. I see, I said. Well, give my congratulations to Wesley and his fiancée. Mom, no offense, please. It's best for everyone, he said, not a twinge of regret in his voice, only relief that the unpleasant conversation was coming to an end. I'm not offended, Elliot. Do as you see fit. I disconnected without waiting for his response and continued to stare out at the rain. The cup of coffee in my hands had gone cold. I felt the familiar burning in my throat, the urge to pour a glass of whiskey, the first of the day. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, quite acceptable considering the circumstances. But I pushed the thought away. Not today. Instead, I let the memories come flooding back. They'd always been with me, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. But now they burst out, as vivid and painful as the first day. 22 years ago, a hostage rescue operation at a bank on Main Street. I was the lead negotiator, trying to convince the robber to let the men go. A teenager, about 16 years old, son of the manager, tried to attack the perp. Shots fired, screams. When the smoke cleared, the boy was lying on the floor with a bullet in his chest. The criminal was also shot. Not by me, by one of the snipers. But it didn't matter. I was in charge of negotiations. I couldn't prevent the tragedy. After that, my love affair with the bottle began. First just to sleep, then to wake up, then just to exist. Elliot, who was 22 at the time, didn't understand. He'd always been practical, always worried about what people would think. And after he married Jennifer, it got worse. She considered me a bad influence, especially after Wesley was born. But there was a period, brief but so precious, when Wesley was a baby and I was still a part of their lives. Despite my strained relationship with Elliot and Jennifer's dislike of me, I would sometimes take my grandson away for the weekend. Wesley loved to hear my stories about police work, though of course I only told what was suitable for children's ears. He would look at me with admiring eyes when I showed him my award-winning pistol, unloaded of course, and kept in the safe. And then there was that day. 8-year-old Wesley found the gun while visiting his grandmother. He was playing with it when Elliot walked in. Hysterics, screaming, accusations. You drunken psycho, you could have killed my son! I swore I locked the safe. I always locked it. But I did have a drink that day. Not much, a couple of drinks to relieve the pain in my back. What if I forgot? What if I left the key somewhere in plain sight? That question had haunted me for 15 years. After that incident, Elliot and Jennifer forbade me from seeing Wesley. I tried to fight it, calling, going to their house. At one point, Elliot threatened a restraining order if I didn't leave them alone. I backed down. Maybe they were right. Maybe I really was dangerous. And then 15 years passed imperceptibly. The last time I saw Wesley was at my high school graduation. I stood at the very back of the auditorium, hoping Elliot and Jennifer wouldn't notice me. Wesley had grown tall and slender, with my blue eyes and confident smile. He hadn't seen me then or pretended not to. I rose from my chair and walked into the house. It was cool and quiet inside. I walked into the study, a small room that had once been a guest bedroom, but now held the remnants of my former life. Police awards on the wall, boxes of documents, an old safe in the corner. I opened it. It now held not only the gun, but a few family photos that I couldn't bring myself to hang on the wall. I pulled out a picture taken on Wesley's 7th birthday. The four of us at the park, me, Elliot, Jennifer, and little Wesley with a birthday hat on his head. Jennifer stands tautly, as she always does in my presence. Elliot is looking somewhere off to the side. Only Wesley and I are smiling genuinely, looking directly into the camera. I remembered that day. I remembered how Wesley asked me to tell a police story before bed, and how Jennifer abruptly cut me off in the middle of the story, telling me it was time for him to go to bed. I remembered the cold look she threw at me over her shoulder as she led the boy out of the room. I'd always known Jennifer didn't like me, but at the time I'd written it off as just a daughter-in-law's usual dislike of her husband's mother. Now, looking back, I saw a systematic campaign to distance me from my son and grandson, and the gun was the perfect excuse. I put the photograph back in the safe and locked it. Then I walked slowly to the kitchen, poured myself some water instead of the whiskey I was still thinking about. The phone call was still ringing in my ears. "We thought it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding." For the first time in years, I felt not resentment, not anger, but a deep, overpowering weariness. Maybe they were right. Maybe I really don't belong at this wedding in this new life Wesley is building. I really screwed up, if not with the gun, then with the alcohol, with the alienation, with letting them push me away. I stared out the window at the rain, my thoughts flowing as monotonously as the drops on the glass. Maybe it was time to let go. To stop clinging to the shards of a relationship that's long gone. To accept that to Wesley, I was just an unpleasant childhood memory. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. So be it. I won't go to the wedding. I won't ruin the day for Wesley or his fiancée, who I've never even met. It will be my last gift to my grandson, my absence. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming on the roof like endless Morse code. A message I had no way of deciphering. It had been a week since Elliot's call. I tried to live my life as normal, but thoughts of Wesley's upcoming wedding never left my mind. Every morning I got up at 6, exercised a habit from my days on the force, then showered and made breakfast. A simple routine that helped keep my mind off the fact that in 2 weeks my only grandson would be getting married, and I wouldn't even see him standing at the altar. On Friday, I went to Crossroads Supermarket on the northern edge of Huntsville. I preferred shopping there to the small store near my house, less chance of running into someone I knew. Years of isolation had taught me the value of anonymity. I moved methodically between the shelves, checking the list: coffee, eggs, bread, frozen vegetables. In the dairy section, I lingered, eyeing the cheeses. Wesley used to love cheese sticks, used to lug them out of my refrigerator in packs when he came to visit. I wonder if he remembers that now. "Excuse me. You're Martha Barnett, aren't you?" A voice behind me made me wince. I turned around and saw a young woman standing a few feet away from me. She was short, with brown hair pulled back into a simple ponytail and intense brown eyes. She was dressed simply: jeans, a white t-shirt, and a light jacket. She looks about 20 to 22 years old. "Who's asking?" I straightened up, instinctively assuming my cop pose. "My name is Amber. Amber Paxton." She held out her hand. "I'm Wesley's fiancée." I froze, not knowing how to react. This could be a trap. Maybe Elliot had sent her to make sure I didn't plan to show up at the wedding. "How do you know who I am?" I asked, ignoring my outstretched hand. Amber lowered her hand, but the smile stayed on her face. "From Wesley's description," she answered simply. Gray hair, a very straight back, an almost military bearing, and She hesitated for a second. She hesitated for a moment. A scar on his right arm. From a bullet, right? I covered the old scar on my right wrist with the palm of my hand, a souvenir from my first year of service. Not many people knew about that scar. I usually wore a watch or long sleeves. Had Wesley told you about me? I asked, still in disbelief. Sure, Amber nodded. Not much, but I saw you in a picture he kept. A family photo of you in the park with him. I remembered it had to be the picture from Wesley's 7th birthday, the copy I kept in the safe. I also heard that you shop here on Fridays, Amber admitted with slight embarrassment. I've been coming here 3 Fridays in a row, hoping I'd run into you. Why? My voice sounded rougher than I intended. Because you're Wesley's grandmother, she said simply. And I feel like you should be at our wedding. I looked around, making sure Elliot or Jennifer weren't around. Your fiancé seems to think otherwise, I said. Wesley didn't make that decision, Amber said firmly. Can we talk? Not here. I hesitated. Prudence told me to leave without getting involved in the family games. But something in this girl's eyes, some sincerity, made me nod. There's a cafe across the street, I said. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a small cafe called Donna's, me with black coffee, Amber with tea and milk. An awkward pause settled between us. So why were you looking to meet me? I finally asked. Amber wrapped both hands around the cup as if trying to keep warm. When Wesley first told me about you, he pictured you as a dangerous, hard-drinking woman who almost shot him as a child, she said bluntly. But there was something in his voice, in the look on his face. It didn't match his words. I'm an elementary school teacher, used to noticing things like that. I cringed when I heard Wesley describe me. What exactly do you want to know? I asked. The truth, Amber answered simply. Wesley says he doesn't remember the details of the incident. He was only 8, but I feel like there's something he's not telling me. I sipped my coffee, trying to hide the sudden trembling in my hands. The gun was in the safe, I said slowly. Always. I swore to Elliot that I'd locked it up, but I'd been drinking that day and maybe I forgot. Maybe I left the key somewhere in plain sight. I don't know. Those were the words I'd been repeating to myself for 15 years. Elliot came to get Wesley and found him with a gun in his hand. I've been forbidden to see my grandson ever since. Amber stared at me intently. You know, Wesley talks in his sleep sometimes, she said. Not often, but he does, especially when he's nervous or has too much to drink. A couple months ago, when we were discussing the guest list for the wedding, he was very upset, and at night, he mumbled something about a gun and his mom. I froze, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. What exactly was he saying? Something like, Mom gave me the key. Don't tell Grandma. I asked him this morning, but he said he didn't remember. Amber leaned closer. Mrs. Barnett, I think Wesley remembers more than he says, and I don't think it wasn't quite what everyone is told. I slowly set the cup down on the table. My head rattled like someone had turned on an old TV on a blank channel. Mom gave me the key. Don't tell Grandma. Could that mean Jennifer? I whispered more to myself than Amber. I don't want to blame anyone, Amber said quickly. It's just, I love Wesley, and I can see that deep down he misses you. When he's sad, he sometimes talks about how you used to take him fishing, how you taught him how to tie special knots. He keeps old pictures of you, even though his parents don't know about it. My mind worked feverishly, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. If Jennifer had given Wesley the key to the safe, could she have done it on purpose? To turn Elliot against me? To cut me off from my family? It sounded paranoid. But the more I thought about it, the more details came to mind. The way Jennifer always watched Wesley and I when we played. How she'd intervene when we started to get too close. How she always reminded Elliot of my drinking problem, even during the times I was sober. Mrs. Barnett, are you okay? Amber's voice brought me back to reality. Yeah, I took a deep breath. It's a lot to process. I understand, Amber nodded. I shouldn't have gotten involved, but Wesley's a good man, and I can see that this thing with you, this breakup, is still hurting him, even though he won't admit it. She paused. You know, he didn't want to cross you off the guest list. It was his parents and mine, they insisted. Your parents? I was surprised. But they don't even know me. They were told the story about the gun. Amber shrugged. They're conservative people. Prestige, reputation, it's very important to them. I grinned wryly. What else would I expect? An ex-cop with a drinking problem wasn't exactly the best addition to the family picture. Thanks for telling me all this, Amber, I said. But what do you suggest we do? The wedding's in 2 weeks, and as far as I'm concerned, the decision's made. I don't know, Amber admitted honestly. I just felt like I had to talk to you. Wesley doesn't know I'm here. He wouldn't disapprove. Afraid of his parents? I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. Not afraid, Amber shook her head. He's a peacemaker, always trying to please everyone, to avoid conflict. She smiled weakly. I think that's why I fell in love with him. He's so kind. I looked at this young woman who'd taken a chance on her fiancé's dangerous grandmother, and I felt a growing sympathy for her. Maybe Wesley made the right choice. Look, Amber, I said, I appreciate what you did, I really do. But I don't want to cause problems for you and Wesley. If my absence from the wedding is the price for your family's peace of mind, I'm willing to pay it. But that's not fair, Amber frowned, especially if you're not actually guilty of what you're being accused of. Life is rarely fair, I shrugged. That's one of the first lessons you learn on the force. Amber lowered her eyes, thoughtful. Then she looked at me again. What if Wesley remembers the truth? What if he admits that it was his mother, not you? That's not likely to happen, I shook my head. It's been 15 years. If he remembers anything, he's probably convinced himself it's just a childish fantasy. Not necessarily, Amber said slowly. Yesterday was the wedding rehearsal. We had a few drinks with friends afterward. Wesley, he was pretty drunk. And I asked him about you, about the gun incident. I got tense. What did he say? At first, the usual story. That you forgot to lock the safe. But then, Amber took a deep breath. Then he said the weirdest thing. That his mom let him play with the gun, said you let him. And when his dad caught him, his mom pretended to be shocked and blamed you. I felt the blood rush from my face. It confirmed my worst suspicions. Are you sure? I asked hoarsely. Did he really say that? Yes, Amber nodded. He didn't remember anything this morning, and I didn't bother to remind him. I guess I was scared. But now that I've talked to you. She stopped talking, looking at me with concern. Mrs. Barnett, are you all right? You're very pale. I couldn't speak. All these years. 15 years of guilt, shame, doubt. 15 years without a grandchild. All because of Jennifer's lies? Mrs. Barnett? Call me Martha, I said automatically, still trying to process what I'd heard. Martha, Amber repeated. What do you think of that? I exhaled slowly, trying to calm down. I started, but my voice trailed off. I coughed and continued. I think that if it's true, I have a right to know. And Wesley deserves to know. And so does Elliot. Do you want to go to the wedding? Amber asked bluntly. I looked into her eyes, the open, honest eyes of a young woman who'd risked a lot for the truth. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't know yet. I can help, Amber offered. If you decide to come. I can meet you at the side entrance, take you inside. Why would you risk it? I asked. If Elliot and Jennifer find out that you've been seeing me, that you helped me sneak into the wedding, it could cause problems for you and Wesley. Because it's the right thing to do, Amber replied simply. And because I love Wesley and I want him to be happy, really happy, not just pretending to be. And with this secret, with these lies, he never will be. I stared at her, amazed at the strength of spirit behind the soft exterior. Wesley had really made the right choice. Think about it, Amber said, pulling a pen out of her purse and writing something down on a napkin. Here's my phone number. Call me when you've made your decision. She stood up, about to leave, but then stopped and added, You know, Wesley looks just like you, not just with his eyes. He has your determination when it comes to protecting those he loves. That's one of the reasons I'm marrying him. With those words, she walked away, leaving me sitting in a daze with a cup of cold coffee and a napkin with a phone number on it. Mommy gave him a key. Mommy let him play with the gun. The words pulsed through my head like heartbeats. Could this be true? And if so, what was I supposed to do with that knowledge now? After meeting Amber, I couldn't sleep. Memories of the day Wesley had been found with the gun kept popping up in my mind, jumbled with new information like someone shuffling a deck of cards. I felt like I was losing my mind. Could Jennifer have done this? Intentionally set me up? Use my own son? The next morning, I decided to check it out. Not because I believed Amber's story right away, but because I couldn't live with that doubt. I called Frank Dowell, my former coworker who had helped look into the gun incident 15 years ago. Frank had been retired for 10 years, but we kept in touch, rare calls at Christmas, occasional meetings over coffee on the anniversary of the death of a mutual friend who died in the line of duty. "Frank, it's Martha," I said when he answered. "Martha!" His voice sounded genuinely pleased. "How you doing, old girl? Haven't heard from you in ages." "I'm fine," I replied. "Listen, we need to talk, in person. It's important." Frank, to his credit, didn't ask any questions over the phone. "At the Bluebird, in an hour?" "I'll be there." I disconnected and headed for the shower. The Bluebird was a small cafe on the outskirts of town where cops, active and retired, often gathered. The place was secluded enough to have confidential conversations and public enough to feel safe. Frank was already waiting for me at a corner table, a cup of coffee and a plate of half-eaten sandwiches in front of him. He had aged since the last time I'd seen him, more gray in his hair, deeper wrinkles around his eyes, but still the same straight back, the same attentive ex-cop look that never fails to watch the people around him. "Martha," he stood up, wrapping his arms around me. "You look good." "Lying and not blushing?" I grinned, sitting down across from him. "But thanks." The waitress came over and I ordered a black coffee. Waiting until she stepped away, I looked Frank straight in the eye. "Remember that incident with Wesley and the gun?" The smile faded from his face. "Of course I remember." He frowned. "What happened?" "I have reason to believe that it wasn't what we thought it was." I paused, picking my words. "That it wasn't me who gave Wesley the gun, but his mother. Intentionally." Frank leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful. "What makes you think that?" I told him about the meeting with Amber, about what Wesley had said to her while drunk. Frank listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. "It's possible," he said slowly when I finished. "In fact, it would explain some of the inconsistencies." "What inconsistencies?" I stepped forward. "Frank, if you know something, tell me." Frank sighed, rubbing his chin. "You see, when all this happened, Donovan and I were the first ones to arrive on your son's call. He was hysterical, screaming that you almost killed Wesley." The boy sat on the couch, pale as a ghost. Jennifer was hugging him, crying. I remembered that. I was in my bedroom, trying to recover from Elliot's tantrum when the police arrived. Frank had been sympathetic to me then, but had spoken formally. Colleague or not, procedure was procedure. "We interviewed everyone individually," Frank continued. "And in the boy's story, there were odd. He said that an adult gave him a gun, not grandma, but an adult. When I clarified, he looked at the mother and said it was you. But his eyes?" Frank shook his head. "You see, I've worked with children for 20 years, and I can tell when a kid isn't telling the whole truth." "Why didn't you say anything to me then?" I felt anger rising inside. What was I supposed to say? Frank spread his hands. "Hey, Martha, I think your daughter-in-law set you up by using your own son." I had no proof, only suspicions. "And you were in a terrible state as it was. Besides," he lowered his voice, "you know how it is in families. Even if we'd gotten Jennifer out, Elliot would still have taken her side, and the boy would have been caught between two fires." I knew he was right. I had enough family cases in my practice to know that logic and facts were often powerless against emotional ties. "One more thing," Frank added. When we arrived, the key to the safe was on the kitchen table. Not in the bedroom where you usually kept it, but in the kitchen. I remember because I thought it was odd. But then again, there was no way to prove anything. "Maybe you put it there yourself." I closed my eyes, trying to remember. That day was a blur. First, a couple glasses of whiskey to take away the pain in my back. Then Elliot's screams. Then the police, the questions, the accusations. I've never left my key in the kitchen, I said slowly. Never. It was always either in my pocket or in the nightstand drawer by the bed. That's what I thought, Frank nodded. But I repeat, there was no way to prove it. So I decided it was best not to traumatize the child any further. He was scared enough as it was. We were quiet for a while. The waitress brought my coffee, but I hardly noticed. My mind was spinning with scraps of thoughts, memories, suspicions. Why did Jennifer do that? I muttered, more to myself than to Frank. Why risk her own son like that? You really don't get it, do you? Frank looked at me in surprise. Martha, she was jealous. Wesley adored you, always talking about his grandmother, the policewoman, proud of you. Jennifer wanted to be the center of his world. And then you show up with your cop stories and fishing trips. I remembered how Wesley had asked for another gangster story, how his eyes had lit up when I'd taught him how to tie nautical knots, a skill I'd learned as a child from my sailor father. Jennifer always stood back with her lips pressed together. Besides, Frank went on, Elliot was always, let's just say, under his wife's thumb. But you were the only person whose opinion meant anything to him. Jennifer wanted to end that bond for good. And she succeeded, I said bitterly. Yes, Frank nodded. But now you know the truth. What are you going to do? I sipped my coffee, thinking, I don't know yet, but I can't just forget about it. Be careful, Martha. Frank leaned closer. Jennifer's not the type to give up without a fight. If you decide to reveal the truth, she'll deny everything to the last. And Elliot will probably believe her over you. I know. I finished my coffee and stood up. Thank you, Frank. I really do. Hey, he caught my arm. Keep me in the loop, okay? And if you need any help, call me. I nodded and walked out of the cafe, feeling both devastated and overwhelmed. 15 years of guilt and doubt, 15 years without a grandchild, all because of Jennifer's lies. I didn't know whether to cry or scream with rage. On the way home, I called Amber. We agreed to meet at the same cafe where we'd talked the first time. I arrived early, chose a table in the corner, away from the windows, an old police habit of always sitting with my back to the wall, facing the entrance. Amber showed up exactly at the appointed time, sat across from me. She looked a little tense, but determined. I'm glad you called, she said. I spoke to a former colleague who had investigated the gun incident. I cut straight to the chase. He confirmed that there were inconsistencies in Wesley's statement, and that the key to the safe had been found in an unexpected place, the kitchen, even though I'd never left it there. Amber nodded, her eyes serious. That confirms what Wesley said. Not exactly, I shook my head. It's just circumstantial evidence. The word of an 8-year-old child versus the word of a grown woman, the mother of that child. Without direct evidence, it's worthless. But Wesley's an adult now, Amber countered. If he confirms that he remembers what really happened. You said yourself that he didn't remember what he said to you this morning, I reminded him. And even if he did, it would be word against word. Jennifer would deny it, and Elliot would believe her over Wesley. Believe me, I've seen this happen plenty of times. Amber pressed her lips together, pondering. Then what are you suggesting? Tell me more about the night Wesley confessed to you, I asked. Every detail you remember. Amber nodded and began to tell me. It was after the wedding rehearsal. We went to Johnny's bar with some friends and had a few drinks. Wesley was upset because his parents insisted on not inviting you. He didn't want to discuss it in front of everyone, so we went out on the terrace to smoke. Well, I don't smoke, but I wanted to talk to him alone. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I asked him why he was so upset about a man who, according to his own words, had been a danger to him as a child. And then he kind of broke down, said he'd lived with that lie all these years, that he actually remembered his mom opening the safe and giving him the gun, saying that Grandma let him see it. And then when his dad caught him, she pretended to be shocked and blamed you, and made him confirm that version. Did he say why she did it? I asked. Yes, Amber nodded. He said, she hesitated. He said that Mom always hated you, that you were the only person Elliot really respected, and that you had too much influence over Wesley. She wanted to cut you out of their lives, he said. It matched what Frank was saying. I felt a wave of anger rising in me, not so much at Jennifer, but at myself. How could I have been so blind? How could I have believed that I could have put Wesley in danger, even while drunk? What happened after he confessed? I asked. He started crying, Amber said quietly. He said he hated himself for being such a coward all those years ago, that he should have told the truth a long time ago, but he was afraid of ruining his family. And then he just blacked out. He fell asleep right there on the couch on the terrace. I barely got him home. And in the morning, he didn't remember a thing. And you didn't remind him? Amber shook her head. I didn't know how. It's such a bomb. I was afraid that if I told him, he'd panic or think I made it all up, or that it would ruin his relationship with his parents right before the wedding. She looked at me guiltily. I know it was cowardly of me, but then I decided to find you. I thought you had a right to know. I reached out and squeezed her hand. You did the right thing, Amber. Thank you. We didn't talk for a moment. The cafe was quiet, with only the soft music playing and the occasional clinking of cups. What are you going to do? Amber finally asked. I took a deep breath. The decision I'd made was risky, perhaps reckless, but I'd lived with that lie for too long. I'm going to the wedding, I said firmly, and I would make the truth come out. Amber's eyes widened. But how? They won't let you in. Security, the guest list. I've been a police officer for 28 years, I smiled weakly. Believe me, if I want to get in somewhere, I'll get in. I can help, Amber said quickly. Meet you at the side entrance. Walk you inside. I shook my head. No, I don't want you to jeopardize your relationship with Wesley. I'll be fine on my own. But what are you going to do once you're inside? Amber insisted. Just blame Jennifer in front of all the guests? They'll think you're crazy. No, I shook my head. I'll talk to Wesley. Directly. I'll ask him if he remembers what really happened. If he admits the truth in front of Elliot and Jennifer, well, then we'll see what happens. And if he doesn't? Amber asked quietly. What if he's scared? Then I'll leave, I said simply. And I'll never try to reconnect with my family again. I'll accept the fact that the past can't be changed. Amber looked at me with respect and concern. You're very brave, she said. I grinned. No, just old and stubborn. And I've lived with this lie for too long. We went over the details of the plan. The wedding was to be held at the Grand Hotel downtown in the Grand Ballroom. Amber drew me a rough layout of the room, noting where the bride and groom's parents would sit, where the ceremony would take place, and where the banquet would be. I'll be in the small bride's room to the right of the ballroom entrance starting at 11 in the morning, she said. If you need any help, look for me there. Thank you. I folded up the plan and tucked it away in my bag. But try to stay out of it. I don't want you to get between me and Jennifer. I'm not afraid of Jennifer, Amber said firmly. You should be, I said seriously. A woman who is capable of using her own child to frame another person is capable of a lot of things. We said our goodbyes and I headed home. A plan was already forming in my head. I needed to prepare myself, mentally and physically. The confrontation ahead would not be easy. At home, I pulled my best suit out of my closet, the dark blue, austere one I wore to important events at the precinct. It still fit me, though it was a little loose at the waist. Then I opened the safe and pulled out the reward gun, the same one that had destroyed my family. I wasn't going to bring it with me to the wedding, of course. I just wanted to look at it, hold it in my hands. Sitting on the edge of the bed with the gun in my hands, I thought about the confrontation ahead, about what I would say to Wesley, to Elliot, to Jennifer, about the possible consequences. Part of me was afraid I'd only make the situation worse, create more division in the family. But the other part, the stronger part, longed for the truth, for justice. For too long I'd lived with this burden of guilt. Too long had I let Jennifer's lies poison my life and the life of my grandson. I carefully put the gun back in the safe, locked it, and tucked the key in my pocket. The decision was made. In 3 days, I would go to Wesley's wedding, uninvited and unwelcome. And I would finally reveal the truth that had remained in the shadows for too long. The morning of the wedding day was surprisingly clear. I woke up at 5 a.m., an old habit from my time on the police force, and immediately realized that I couldn't sleep again. There were too many thoughts running through my head, my heart pounding too hard at the thought of the upcoming confrontation. I took a long shower, drank a strong cup of coffee. Then I pulled out my dark blue suit, white blouse, and low-heeled shoes. As I dressed, I thought about the fact that today might be the last time I would see my son and grandson. The thought hurt, but I pushed it aside. 15 years of lies and estrangement is enough. Brushing my hair in front of the mirror, I looked at my reflection appraisingly. Gray hair, neatly styled, straight back, wrinkles around my eyes and mouth. I looked exactly the way a groom's grandmother should look, dignified, reserved. But there was a determination in my eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. At 10 in the morning, I left the house, got into my old Honda, and headed downtown. The Grand Hotel was one of the most prestigious wedding venues in Huntsville, a 5-story Victorian-style building with a grand ballroom, a garden for photo shoots, and a reputation that justified the high prices. I knew Amber's parents had paid for the wedding, another sign that the bride's family was wealthy. I parked 2 blocks away from the hotel so as not to attract attention. I pulled a small flask of whiskey out of the glove compartment, a gift from my coworkers for my retirement, and took a small sip. Not for courage, but to calm my nerves. Then I checked the time. 11:20. The ceremony was supposed to start at 1 o'clock, so I had plenty of time to look around and find the best time to show up. I walked slowly toward the hotel, watching the hustle and bustle around me. The guests were already starting to gather, men in suits, women in smart dresses. A few waiters were carrying trays of champagne out into the garden, where a preliminary buffet was to be held. A man in a suit stood at the main entrance checking invitations. Walking around the building, I found the side entrance Amber had mentioned. There was a guard there too, but he seemed less attentive, a young guy constantly checking something on his phone. I decided to wait for a convenient moment. About 10 minutes passed. I watched from around the corner as a van with flowers pulled up to the side entrance. 2 men began unloading huge baskets of white and pink roses. The security guard stepped away from the door to help them. I waited until they were all together inside with the first batch of flowers and quickly followed them, keeping in the shadows of the baskets. No one paid any attention to me. The woman in the strict suit could very well have been one of the event organizers or the guests who had arrived early. Once inside, I quickly oriented myself. The hotel was familiar to me. I'd once been involved in a theft investigation here, and I remembered the layout well. I headed toward the ballroom, walking confidently, as if I had every right to be here. Along the way, I noticed a door labeled Bride's Room. That's where Amber was supposed to be. I hesitated for a second but decided not to drag her into this. The less she was involved, the better for her and for Wesley. The ballroom was already fully prepared for the ceremony. Rows of chairs decorated with white ribbons, an archway of flowers against the far wall where the bride and groom were to stand. Musicians were tuning instruments in the corner. A few guests had already taken their seats, but most were apparently still in the garden enjoying the buffet. I had chosen a seat in the farthest corner of the hall from where I could watch the scene without being noticed. My plan was simple. Wait until everyone was gathered, when the ceremony or even the banquet afterward would begin, and only then make my move. I didn't want to disrupt the wedding just to restore justice. Time dragged agonizingly slow. I watched as the hall gradually filled with guests. I didn't know many of them, probably Wesley's friends or Amber's relatives, but some of the faces were familiar. Old family friends, Elliot's co-workers. None of them noticed me, sitting in the corner with my back straight and my face impenetrable. At 12:45, Elliot entered the room. My son looked tense but solemn in his dark suit. Next to him walked Jennifer, in a pale blue dress with perfect hair and a fake smile on her face. I felt a wave of anger rise in me at the sight of this woman who had ruined my relationship with my son and grandson. But I restrained myself. Now was not the time for emotions. They took seats in the front row, with their backs to me. A few minutes later, Wesley appeared, accompanied by his friend, apparently the best man. My grandson had grown into a handsome young man, tall, slender, with my blue eyes and confident posture. but I noticed how he nervously corrected his tie, how his gaze ran around the hall. He looked more frightened than happy. The music began to play and the guests stood up. The door swung open and Amber appeared in a white dress, arm in arm with her father. She was beautiful. A simple, elegant dress, minimal makeup, her hair gathered in a simple but elegant style. As she walked down the aisle, her gaze stopped on me for a second. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she quickly got over herself and continued down the aisle to where Wesley was waiting. The ceremony was short and touching. Amber and Wesley exchanged vows, exchanged rings, and kissed to the applause of the guests. I sat still, watching it all with a mixture of pride and bitterness. My grandson was getting married, and I was here as an uninvited guest hiding in the shadows. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the adjoining room for the banquet. I followed them, still unnoticed in the general bustle. The tables were arranged around the perimeter, leaving room for dancing in the center. The newlyweds sat at the center table with their parents. I took a seat at the far table where some elderly relatives sat. Apparently not very familiar with the Barnett family, they didn't even look in my direction. The toasts began, the congratulations. Elliot gave a speech about how proud he was of his son, how happy he was to welcome Amber into their family. Amber's dad talked about what a wonderful couple they would be. Wesley thanked everyone for their support, but his eyes were troubled and his smile was strained. I waited for the right moment. When the toasts were over, the dancing began. Wesley and Amber opened the ball, then other couples joined them. I saw Elliot and Jennifer take to the dance floor as well. This was my chance. I stood up and headed straight to the center table, where Wesley and Amber had just returned from their dance. They were sitting next to each other, talking quietly. Amber noticed me first. Her eyes widened, and she said something quickly to Wesley. He turned around, a look of amazement on his face that made me hesitate for a second. "Grandma?" he whispered, rising. "What are you doing here?" "Congratulations on the wedding, Wesley," I said calmly. "You've chosen a beautiful girl." At that moment, Elliot and Jennifer returned from the dance floor. Elliot froze when he saw me, and Jennifer turned pale. "Mom!" Elliot's voice was full of disbelief and anger. "How did you get in here?" "I told you clearly." "I know what you said, Elliot," I said, not taking my eyes off Wesley. "But I didn't come here to ruin the party. I came for the truth." By now, the conversations at the neighboring tables had died down. The guests were turning in our direction, sensing a scandal brewing. "Wesley," I addressed my grandson directly, ignoring Elliot's indignant face. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, without fear, for the sake of all of us." Wesley looked confused but nodded. Amber took his hand as if giving him support. "Do you remember the day they found the gun?" I asked. "Do you remember how you actually gained access to the safe?" Silence hung in the hall. Jennifer stepped forward, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you!" she shouted. "On the day of our son's wedding, you come in here and bring this up? You're crazy!" "Let him answer, Jennifer." My voice was calm but firm. "If you're not afraid of the truth." Elliot grabbed my arm. "Mom, stop this now. You're ruining Wesley's wedding. Get out before I call security." I shook off his hand and looked at Wesley again. "Answer me, Wesley. Do you remember who gave you the key to the safe that day?" Wesley stood there like a thunderclap, looking from me to his parents, then to Amber. There was a struggle in his eyes. "Wesley, don't listen to her." Jennifer's voice shook. "She's trying to manipulate you like she always does." "No," Wesley said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm. "No, I remember. I've always remembered." There was absolute silence in the room. Even the music seemed to have died down. "What do you remember, son?" Elliot's voice sounded strained. Wesley took a deep breath, then looked directly at his mother. "I remember my mom giving me the key to my grandmother's safe, said, 'Grandma, let me see the gun.'" His voice strengthened. "I remember you telling me not to tell Grandma that it was going to be our secret. And then when Daddy found me, you acted shocked and blamed Grandma." Jennifer turned even whiter, then her face contorted. "You're lying!" she screamed. "You were a child, you can't remember. She brainwashed you." "I haven't seen my grandmother in 15 years, Wesley said calmly. "How could she have brainwashed me?" Elliot stood stunned, shifting his gaze from his son to his wife. Jennifer, is it true? Of course not. Jennifer was almost shouting. Are you really going to believe this alcoholic woman over me? Your wife? I'm not asking her. I'm asking our son. Elliot's voice was quiet, but you could hear the pain in it. Jennifer looked around, seeing the curious looks of the guests, the shocked faces of Amber's parents. Her face went from white to red. This is ridiculous. She turned to Wesley. Why didn't you ever talk about this before if you remembered? Because I was afraid, Wesley answered quietly. At first, I was too young to realize what had happened. Then, when I began to realize, it was too late. Grandmother disappeared from our lives, and I didn't want to break up the family. Jennifer took a step back, her eyes darting around like a hunted animal. It's all lies. She was drunk. She forgot to lock the safe. It was her fault. The key was found on the kitchen table, I said. I never leave it there. It's always either in my pocket or in the bedroom. Frank Dowell, the officer who investigated the incident, noticed it. Wesley initially said an adult gave him the gun, not me specifically. It was only after you looked at him that he changed his statement. Frank Dowell, Elliot repeated, and I saw the realization start to show on his face. He knew Frank, respected him as an officer. He told you that? Yes, I nodded. He'd always suspected something was wrong with the story. But there was no proof, only suspicion. Elliot turned to Jennifer, his face grim. Is it true? You used our son to alienate him from his mother? Jennifer opened her mouth to object, but the words wouldn't come. Her gaze darted between Elliot and Wesley, then settled on me, full of hatred. You've always been between us, she hissed. Always. Cop mom, hero mom. Elliot never made a decision without your approval. Wesley adored you more than he adored me. His own mother. I had to do something. Shocked gasps rang out in the hall. Elliot took a step back, looking at his wife as if she were a stranger. You confessed? His voice was full of disbelief. Did you really do it? Jennifer suddenly realized what she had said. Her eyes widened. She tried to pull herself together. I didn't mean that. But it was too late. The truth had come out clear and unmistakable. Wesley stepped toward Jennifer, his face pale. All these years, Mom. You made me believe that Grandma put me in danger. You ruined our family. Jennifer tried to take his hand, but he pulled away. I did it for you, for us. She was an alcoholic. She was dangerous. The only dangerous person here was you, Wesley said quietly. And you used me as a weapon. Jennifer looked at Elliot, seeking support, but my son looked away, his face stony. She looked around, seeing the shocked, judgmental looks of the guests. Then, without a word, she turned and walked quickly out of the hall. A heavy silence fell. Elliot stood motionless, as if he didn't know what to do. Then he turned to me, and I saw a mixture of shock, shame, and remorse in his eyes. Mom, he stammered, unable to find the words. Not now, Elliot, I said softly. This isn't the time. I turned to Wesley and Amber. I'm sorry for ruining your wedding. I didn't mean for it to come out so publicly, but the truth has been hidden for too long. Wesley looked at me with so many emotions on his face that I couldn't read them all. Then, to my surprise, he stepped forward and hugged me the first time in 15 years. Thank you, Grandma, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. I hugged him back, feeling tears come to my eyes. Amber came over to us, her face serious but calm. What do we do now? She asked, looking at the guests, who stood in awkward silence, watching the family drama. Wesley straightened up, taking her hand. We'll keep celebrating, he said firmly. This is still our day. And it's even more important now because today the truth has finally come out. He turned to the guests. I apologize for this unexpected development, but please don't let it ruin the party. Music, please continue. The musicians, after a moment's confusion, played again. The guests gradually began to talk, returning to their tables, though their eyes were still often on us. Elliot stood aside, lost and confused. Then, as if making a decision, he came to us. Mom? His voice was hoarse. Stay, please, you should have been here from the beginning. I looked at my son, seeing remorse and pain in his eyes, then at Wesley and Amber, who looked at me with hope. And I realized that despite all the drama, this day could be the beginning of healing, not a new breakup. Okay, I nodded. I'll stay. It was a week after Wesley and Amber's wedding. I sat on my porch, just as I had that morning when Elliot's phone call had changed everything. Only now it was sunny instead of raining, and I wasn't holding a cup of coffee, but an old photo album. After the scandal at the wedding, Jennifer never returned to the hall. Elliot went looking for her, but she'd already left. The wedding went on. Wesley and Amber insisted on it. They danced, accepted congratulations, cut the cake. But the shadow of what had happened hung over it all like a cloud over a sunny day. I stayed until the end, sitting at the table next to Elliot, who looked lost and confused. We hardly spoke at all. It wasn't the time or place for serious conversation. But at one point, he took my hand and squeezed it, the way he used to do when he was a kid, when he was scared or needed support. I squeezed his hand in return. After the wedding, I went home and slept soundly for the first time in a long time, without nightmares or waking up in the middle of the night. The truth had finally come out, and it was strangely relieving, despite the pain and chaos it had caused. Now, flipping through the photo album, I stopped at the pictures that captured happy moments. Elliot with his college diploma, little Wesley on the carousel, me and Wesley fishing. There were also pictures of Jennifer, always a little tense with a strained smile. I noticed things now that I hadn't seen before, the way she always tried to get between Elliot and me in family photos, the way her hand rested possessively on Wesley's shoulder. The sound of a car pulling up pulled me out of my musings. I recognized Elliot's sedan and felt my heart beat faster. We hadn't spoken since the wedding was over. I didn't know what to expect from this visit. Elliot got out of the car and walked slowly up to the veranda. He looked haggard, the circles under his eyes, the unkempt stubble, the wrinkled shirt. I silently pointed to a nearby chair. He sat down, looking past me. "How are you?" I asked after a moment of heavy silence. "Lousy," he answered briefly. Jennifer moved out, said she was filing for divorce. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt satisfied that Jennifer had gotten what she deserved, but the other part of me, the motherly part, ached for my son. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "You are?" He looked at me bitterly. "You're sorry that the woman who ruined your relationship with your grandson is walking out of my life?" "I'm sorry you're suffering," I replied patiently. "Regardless, she's been your wife for 25 years. Elliot sighed, hunched in his chair. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Part of me hates her for what she did. But the other part—" He fell silent, searching for words. "We lived together for 25 years, raised a son. We've had some good times too, you know." I nodded. Of course I understood. Life is rarely black and white. "I'm also mad at you," Elliot said suddenly, straightening in his chair. "Why did you come to the wedding? Why did you make such a scene in front of all the guests? Couldn't you have chosen another time? Another place?" I'd been expecting that question, and I was ready for it. 15 years, Elliot," I said calmly. 15 years I'd lived with the stigma of being the woman who'd endangered my own grandson. 15 years without you, without Wesley. When else was I supposed to tell the truth? At a funeral. Mine or yours? Elliot flinched at those words. "You could have come to my house. You could have talked to me alone. And you would have listened to me?" I raised an eyebrow. "After you told me I wasn't invited to my grandson's wedding?" He looked away, recognizing my point. "But Wesley's wedding. It was supposed to be his lucky day. And it was his happy day," I countered. "Maybe not as planned, but in the end, Wesley got what he'd been denied for 15 years, the truth and his grandmother." I paused. "By the way, did you ask him what he thought of it?" Elliot shook his head. "We didn't talk much after the wedding. He and Amber went on a wedding trip to Hawaii. Didn't get back until yesterday." We fell silent again. I looked at my son, the graying temples, the wrinkles around his eyes, the slumped shoulders. When did he get so old? When did we lose so much time? "I don't know if I can forgive Jennifer," Elliot said finally. "But I don't know if I can forgive you either for the way you revealed the truth." I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said calmly. I did what I thought was necessary. Maybe it wasn't the best way, but I couldn't see any other way. Elliot stood up and walked over to the veranda railing, looking out over my little garden. You know what the lousy part is? He said without turning around. That somewhere deep down inside, I always suspected something was wrong with that story. Wesley was never afraid of you, even after the incident. He cried when I forbade him to see you. But I chose to believe Jennifer, because it was easier. We all make choices, Elliot, I said softly. And then we live with the consequences. He turned to me and I could see the tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom, for not believing you, for taking 15 years away from you and your grandson. I stood up and walked over to him and put my hand on his shoulder. You forgive me too, son, for not being a better mother, for the alcohol, for the fact that sometimes work was more important to me than family. We stood like that for a few minutes, not hugging, but feeling some kind of connection we haven't had in years. I don't know what's going to happen next, Elliot finally said. With Jennifer, with us. No one knows, I shrugged. But now we have a chance to find out. And that's something. Elliot nodded, wiping his eyes. I have to go. I've got a lot to think about. He walked down the porch, but he stopped at the car and turned around. I'll call you, Mom. I promise. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When his car came around the corner, I sat back in my chair and opened the photo album again. I don't know how long I sat like that, lost in my memories, but I was brought out of my reverie by the sound of another car pulling up. This time, it was a small silver SUV that I didn't recognize. Wesley and Amber stepped out of it, holding hands. They walked up to the porch, and I could tell that Wesley was nervous. He was rubbing the sleeve of his shirt, the way he used to do when he was nervous as a kid. Grandma, he said, and the word so simple made my heart clench with tenderness. Can we talk? Of course. I pointed to the chairs. Have a seat. Would you like anything? Lemonade? Coffee? No, thanks. Amber smiled softly. We won't be long. They sat down next to each other, still holding hands. Wesley looked tanned after Hawaii, but still tense. How was the wedding trip? I asked to lighten the mood. Great. Wesley answered automatically, but I could tell his thoughts were far away. Grandma, he stammered, then took a breath and continued. I owe you an apology for keeping silent all these years, for letting Mom ruin our relationship. You were 8 years old, Wesley, I said softly. You were a kid who was caught between two fires. But then I grew up, he protested. I remembered everything, always. But it was easier to pretend I didn't. Easier to live with that lie than to come clean and see my family destroyed. He lowered his head. I was a coward. No, I leaned over and took his free hand. You were a good son who tried to protect his family. That's not cowardice, Wesley. It's love. Amber squeezed his other hand, supporting him. I've always missed you, Wesley said quietly. All these years, I still have a picture of you and me fishing. At Gunther Lake? I nodded. You caught your first trout, and you taught me how to clean it properly. Wesley smiled. I remembered. We sat in silence, savoring the moment of reunion. Then Wesley became serious again. What do you think will happen to Mom and Dad now? I sighed. I don't know, Wesley. Your father was here today. He's very upset. Said your mom moved out and is talking about divorce. I know. Wesley nodded. She called me asking me to talk to my dad, to convince him to give her a second chance. What do you think? I asked cautiously. Wesley hesitated. I don't know. Part of me is so angry with her that I don't want to see her. But the other part, she's still my mother. And she and my father were together for 25 years. That's not an easy thing to cross out. No, it's not, I agreed. And no one can make that decision for your father. Or you. Amber and I talked about it. Wesley looked at his wife fondly. And we decided that no matter what happens with Mom and Dad, we want you to be a part of our lives again. I felt tears come to my eyes. I would like that, Wesley. I really do. Amber smiled. Actually, we have a proposal. We want to have a family dinner this Friday, at our new house, and we really want you to come. I froze. Who else is coming? Dad, Wesley answered. Mom. If she agrees to come. We haven't asked yet. I felt myself tense at the thought of seeing Jennifer. After everything that's happened, after everything she's done. I know it's a lot to ask. Wesley looked at me hopefully. But Amber and I were thinking, maybe at the same table, in a quiet setting, we could at least start a conversation. Not about the past, but about the future. I'm not sure your mother would want to see me, I said cautiously. Maybe, Wesley nodded. But I want to give her a chance. And you too. He squeezed my hand. Please, Grandma, at least think about it. I looked at my grandson, a grown man who, despite the pain and betrayal, was still trying to keep his family together. I looked at his wife, who supported him in this difficult decision, and felt both pride and fear. I'll think about it, I promised. They didn't stay long. Wesley said they had a lot to sort out after the trip, and they'd leave. But before he left, he hugged me tightly, just like he had at the wedding. But now, no audience, no drama, just a grandson hugging a grandmother he hadn't seen in 15 years. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, to find out your decision about dinner. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When they left, I went back into the house and walked straight into the study. I opened the safe and pulled out the reward gun, the symbol of what had started it all. I looked at it, remembering the day Elliot had found Wesley with that gun in his hands, the day that had changed everything. A family dinner with Elliot, who we were just starting to rebuild a relationship with Wesley and Amber, who were trying to start a new family on the ruins of the old one, and with Jennifer, the woman who'd lied for 15 years, who'd used her own son to destroy my relationship with my grandson. Part of me wanted to say no, to tell Wesley that I wasn't ready to sit at the same table with Jennifer, that some wounds were too deep to heal so easily. But the other part, the part that had kept the pictures in the safe all these years, the part that had never stopped loving my son and grandson despite the estrangement, that part knew that Wesley was right. You can't build a future without dealing with the past. I carefully put the gun back in the safe and locked it. The key, as always, went into my pants pocket. Tomorrow, Wesley would call to find out my decision, and I still didn't know what I was going to tell him. Going to this dinner was a risk of new pain, new disappointment. But to refuse meant rejecting an outstretched hand, a chance to rebuild a broken family. I walked to the window, looking out at the setting sun. 15 years ago, I'd backed down, let the lies win. Now that the truth had finally come out, was it worth backing down again? I didn't know the answer, but tomorrow when the phone rang, I would have to find it.